We often move through the world with a quiet, persistent Akia sense of profound isolation, as though we are solitary wanderers accidentally dropped into a vast, indifferent universe. This deeply rooted feeling of being a stranger in our own lives breeds endless striving and exhaustion. Now, let us explore the profound wisdom found not in adding more, but in letting go. To begin this journey, we must first look closely at the architecture of our everyday experience. From the earliest days of our awareness, we are conditioned to draw a sharp, impenetrable line between what is me and what is not me. We inhabit a mental framework where the self is perceived as a fragile entity, encased within the boundary of the skin, staring out at an alien landscape. This is the ordinary world. We inhabit a world of division, where the fundamental premise of our existence is one of confrontation. We are taught to view the universe not as our home, but as a territory to be navigated, managed, and conquered. This perspective, so deeply ingrained that it feels like objective reality, is the quiet architect of our most profound anxieties. When we identify exclusively as an isolated ego, a solitary spark of consciousness floating in the dark void of the cosmos, we are naturally plagued by a sense of precariousness. If we are merely strangers who have been thrust into this world, then the world is inevitably a threat. It becomes something foreign, unpredictable, and entirely outside of our control. We spend our lives building fortresses of intellect, wealth, and status to protect this fragile sense of self from the chaotic forces that surround us. Yet, no matter how thick the walls become, the underlying hum of vulnerability remains. Consider the sheer exhaustion that accompanies this way of living. The modern mind operates as a tireless sentinel, forever scanning the horizon for danger, analyzing past missteps, and projecting future catastrophes. We are trapped in a relentless internal monologue that narrates our separation. It tells us that we must fight to survive, that we must prove our worth, and that we must carve out a space for ourselves in a universe that is fundamentally indifferent to our existence. This striving is the hallmark of the isolated self. We are like a person trying to keep the ocean at bay with a teaspoon, entirely unaware that we are, in fact, made of water. The philosopher Alan Watts often spoke of this predicament, describing it as the hallucination of the skin-encapsulated ego. It is a grand optical illusion of the mind. We look at the world and perceive a multitude of disconnected objects and events, just as we might look at a tree and see only distinct leaves, ignoring the trunk, the roots, and the soil that nourish them. Our language and our culture reinforce this fragmentation. We use words like I and it, here and there, creating a linguistic map that splits reality into rigid categories. While this map is useful for practical survival, we make a critical error when we confuse the map for the territory itself. When the mind operates exclusively through this dualistic lens, it divides experience into a series of opposing forces: light and dark, good and evil, success and failure. The self is pitted against the other. In this state of fractured perception, we become profoundly lonely. Even in crowded rooms or within intimate relationships, the barrier of the isolated ego remains. We reach out across the chasm, hoping to connect, yet the fundamental belief in our separateness keeps us at arm's length from the very world we long to embrace. We feel like tourists in reality, passing through a foreign land, taking photographs of experiences but never truly touching the essence of the place. This profound sense of alienation is not a personal failure, it is the natural consequence of a mistaken identity. It is a societal trance we have collectively entered. We have forgotten our origins. We speak of coming into the world, as if we arrived from somewhere else, rather than recognizing that we grew out of it, just as an apple grows out of an apple tree. The anxiety, the overthinking, the quiet desperation that so many of us feel are not signs that we are broken. They are symptoms of a deep, unrecognized homesickness. We are yearning for a connection that we have never actually lost, but only forgotten how to see. The tragedy of the ego's struggle is that its very efforts to find security only deepen its sense of isolation. The harder we try to control our environment, to solidify our identity, and to force the universe to conform to our desires, the more disconnected we feel. We build our identities around our jobs, our beliefs, and our achievements, mistaking the roles we play for the essence of who we are. But these roles are fragile constructs, constantly threatened by the inevitable changes of life. When these constructs crumble, as they always do, we are left in a state of terrifying freefall, believing that we are losing ourselves, when in truth, we are only losing an illusion. Our ordinary world, then, is one defined by unnecessary friction. It is a life lived in resistance to the flow of reality, where the mind is locked in a perpetual argument with what is. We resist pain, and in doing so, we create suffering. We cling to pleasure, and in doing so, we create fear of its loss. The isolated self is caught in a trap of its own making, oscillating between desire and aversion, never finding true rest. We are exhausted not because life is inherently burdensome, but because we are carrying the impossible weight of an illusory separation. We are strangers only because we have drawn a conceptual circle around ourselves and declared everything outside of it to be alien. But what happens when we dare to step outside that circle? When we dare to step outside the conceptual circle, the first realization that dawns on us is the profound porosity of our own boundaries. Consider, for a moment, the simple, quiet act of breathing. We are heavily conditioned to think of the breath as something a mechanical function of a separate, independent body taking in resources from a vast external environment. But where exactly does the outside world end and your internal world begin? The air in the room flows seamlessly into your lungs, crossing the invisible threshold of your lips, dissolving into your bloodstream, and becoming the very living cells of your body. In the next moment, it is exhaled, returning to the atmosphere, destined to become part of a swaying tree, a drifting cloud, or another living being. You are not a sealed container, you are a permeable membrane. You are a continuous, dynamic exchange with the environment. To say you are breathing is only half the truth, the other half is that the atmosphere is breathing you. This continuous exchange extends far beyond the physical breath, it is the very nature of perception itself. We conventionally believe that there is a solid, permanent observer situated somewhere securely behind our eyes, passively watching a world that exists entirely out there. But let us examine the profound miracle of seeing. When you look at the brilliant gold of a setting sun or the deep, shadowed green of a forest canopy, the light bounces off those objects, enters your retina, and is translated by your nervous system into the conscious experience of color and shape. Without your eyes and your magnificent brain, there is no light in the visual sense, only invisible electromagnetic radiation. And without the sun and the trees, your eyes have absolutely nothing to perceive. The green of the leaf is not located purely in the leaf, nor is it located purely in your mind. It is a relationship. The observer and the observed are not two separate entities colliding in space, they are two essential, inseparable halves of a single, unified event. The world evokes the self, and the self evokes the world. Once we recognize that our physical existence and our sensory experiences are inextricably woven into the fabric of the universe, we must confront the final, most stubborn fortress of the isolated ego, the mind. We cling fiercely to the notion that we are the standalone authors of our thoughts, the independent captains steering our internal ships. Yet, when we turn our quiet attention inward, we discover a startling, liberating truth. Try to catch the thinker of your thoughts. You will find that you can only ever observe the thought itself, as it arises and passes away. Just as you cannot bite your own teeth or look directly into your own eyes without the aid of a mirror, the eye that tries to observe itself is forever slipping out of grasp. This is because the eye is not a noun, it is not a fixed, miniature entity sitting in the control room of the brain pulling levers. The eye is a verb. It is a process. The thinker and the thought are one and the same continuous stream of consciousness. It is here we discover why so many of our modern approaches to psychological well-being ultimately leave us feeling hollow and fatigued. We attempt to use the isolated self to fix the isolated self. We treat the ego as if it were a broken machine that merely needs new parts, better habits, or a more rigorously positive mindset. We engage in endless, exhausting projects of self-improvement, trying to polish our personalities, acquire more spiritual knowledge, or cultivate a state of permanent, unshakable happiness. But all of this monumental effort is predicated on the foundational illusion that there is a separate me who needs fixing, and a separate world that I must conquer or defend against to find peace. It is akin to trying to smooth out the turbulent waves of the ocean by pressing down on them with a heavy flat iron. The very effort creates more disturbance. The anxiety we feel is the friction of this impossible task. We are trying to lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps, fundamentally unaware that the unified force of the cosmos is already holding us perfectly in place. The ancient philosophical traditions of the East such as Zen, Taoism, and Advaita Vedanta have pointed to a radically different perspective for millennia. They speak of non-duality, a simple yet profound term that translates literally to not two. This is not a rigid religious dogma demanding blind belief, but a verifiable reality inviting direct experience. Non-duality is the recognition that the fundamental nature of existence is an undivided, seamless wholeness. The myriad forms of the universe, the burning stars, the deep oceans, the singing birds, and human consciousness are not distinct, separate objects that have been thrown together in a chaotic cosmic box. Rather, they are diverse, temporary expressions of a single, underlying reality. Just as a vast ocean expresses itself in countless momentary waves, the universe expresses itself in countless, temporary forms. You are not a wave that has somehow become detached from the water, wandering the sea in a lonely search for moisture. You are the ocean, temporarily behaving as a wave. The brilliant philosopher Alan Watts articulated this beautifully when he observed that we have fundamentally misunderstood our relationship with the cosmos. Because we view ourselves as strangers who arrived here from somewhere else, we feel we must endlessly confront reality. But the truth is far more intimate and infinitely more magnificent. You did not come into this world, you came out of it. You are a symptom of the universe, a natural outcropping of the cosmos. Just as an apple tree apples, the universe peoples. You are an intricate process through which the universe is exploring itself, feeling itself, and becoming vibrantly aware of its own breathtaking majesty. Every thought you have, every complex emotion you feel, and every action you take is a movement of the entire cosmos. Localized in the specific, unrepeatable coordinates of time and space that you currently call here and now. To truly glimpse this reality is the ultimate trial of the mind, for it requires the gentle relinquishment of our most cherished, yet most painful illusion, the illusion of control. When we begin to sense that the boundary of the self is porous and fluid, the ego often recoils in self-protective terror. It feels like a kind of psychological dissolution. If I am not this sharply defined, separate individual fighting for my piece of the pie, then who am I? If I am not in absolute control of my destiny, rigidly steering against the currents of the world, will I simply cease to exist? Will I dissolve into a featureless, meaningless void? This fear is entirely natural and completely understandable. It is the acute vertigo of standing at the edge of a vast, beautifully unmapped territory. We desperately cling to our anxieties and our neuroses because, however agonizing they may be, they are deeply familiar. They provide us with a recognizable, solid sense of identity. We would often rather endure the familiar suffering of isolation than step gracefully into the unknown expanse of total interconnectedness. But the profound mentor of non-dual wisdom asks us to gently lean into this fear, to bravely investigate the seemingly empty space where we thought the solid self resided. And when we do so with quiet awareness, we do not find a terrifying, cold void. Instead, we discover a state of boundless, breathing freedom. When the rigid, defensive walls of the ego begin to dissolve, we do not lose ourselves, we expand to include everything. The realization that you are not a stranger here is not a loss of identity, but an unimaginable, glorious widening of it. The universe is not a hostile mechanism operating indifferently outside of you, it is a magnificent, playful dance. And in this moment of profound clarity, you realize that you are not just a dancer, you are the dance itself. Imagine, just for a moment, the profound relief of laying down the heavy, rusted armor of separation. Imagine the deep, cellular rest that comes from realizing you do not have to hold the world together, because you and the world are a single, continuous happening. The exhausting anxiety of trying to force your life into a specific, preconceived shape gives way to a profound, quiet trust in the intelligence of the universe. You are no longer a victim of circumstance, nor an alien visitor trying to conquer a foreign land. You are an intimate, essential feature of the cosmos, as natural as a snow-capped mountain and as inevitable as the sunrise. This is the luminous truth that echoes beneath the ceaseless noise of our overthinking minds. It is the silent, joyous realization that there is nowhere you need to go, and nothing you need to become, because you are already the very fabric of reality itself. How, then, do we integrate this profound, liberating truth into the rhythm of our daily lives? If we are not isolated strangers, but the very universe looking at itself, does this mean we must retreat to a silent mountaintop to maintain this realization? Not at all. The profound beauty of non-duality is that it does not demand we escape the ordinary world, rather, it invites us to return to it entirely transformed. The spiritual journey is not a flight from reality, but a profound descent into the present moment. Before this realization, we chop wood and carry water with a heavy heart, viewing these tasks as burdens imposed upon our isolated selves. After this realization, we still chop wood and carry water, but the friction is gone. The mundane tasks become an effortless dance. When we carry this awakened perception back into our everyday routines, the entire landscape of our inner life shifts. Consider the familiar arrival of anxiety or overthinking. In the past, the isolated ego would immediately arm itself, treating these feelings as foreign invaders that must be conquered or suppressed. We would agonize over our own agonizing. But with the gentle lens of non-duality, we begin to recognize that these mental states are not who we are. They are simply weather patterns passing through the vast, open sky of our awareness. You are not the dark cloud of anxiety, nor are you the turbulent wind of racing thoughts. You are the infinite, undisturbed sky in which these storms temporarily appear and inevitably dissolve. There is no need to fight the weather, you only need to observe it with a quiet, spacious compassion, knowing it cannot touch the fundamental clarity of your true nature. This shift naturally leads to the quiet relinquishment of control. For so long, we have exhausted ourselves trying to steer the river of life, frantically paddling against the current to reach some imagined destination of future happiness. But when you realize that you are not separate from the river, that you are the flow of the water itself, the struggle simply ceases. You discover the profound wisdom of Wu Wei, the ancient Taoist principle of effortless action. This does not mean we become passive or apathetic. We still set goals, we still work, we still love. But we do so without the tense, clutching desperation of the ego. We act with the spontaneous grace of a musician lost in the melody, responding to the demands of the present moment without resistance. We trust the intelligence of the universe because we recognize it as our own deepest intelligence. Even the most ordinary, overlooked moments of our existence become infused with a quiet miracle. Waiting in line at the grocery store, sitting in traffic, or feeling the warm water rush over your hands as you wash the dishes, these are no longer frustrating obstacles blocking your path to some better, more important future. They are recognized as the exact, vibrant locations where the universe is unfolding. There is nowhere else to be. The profound peace we have been desperately seeking in philosophy, in wealth, and in status has always been resting quietly in the center of the present moment, waiting for us to stop running and finally notice it. This profound realization also transforms our relationship with others. When the rigid boundary of the skin-encapsulated ego begins to fade, the illusion of the other softens. We look into the eyes of a stranger and see not an alien competitor, but another mesmerizing expression of the exact same cosmos. Compassion is no longer a moral obligation or a forced virtue. It becomes the most natural, logical response to our shared existence. We treat others with kindness because, at the deepest level of reality, to harm another is quite literally to harm oneself. We are all leaves on the same ancient, magnificent tree, animated by the same singular breath of life. Ultimately, the journey of non-duality is a journey of returning home. It is the joyous discovery that the feeling of alienation was only ever a trick of the mind. You have never been a stranger here. You could not be an outcast from the universe any more than a wave could be an outcast from the ocean. You belong here, completely and entirely, right now, exactly as you are. The universe is not a waiting room, and life is not a test you must pass to earn your place. You are the grand, unfolding tapestry of existence, intricately woven into every star, every grain of sand, and every beating heart. And in that realization, the restless, searching mind finally finds its deep, unbreakable peace. The next time you feel the heavy weight of isolation, step outside and look at the night sky. Do not look at it as a vast emptiness above you, but as your own deep reflection. Take a quiet breath and simply notice the awareness looking back. If you found a moment of peace here, subscribe to continue the journey.